Hi, folks. Welcome today to our third Lenten study as we're focusing upon the last words that Jesus shares from the cross. And so appreciate that you've been with me here for a couple of these, and we're here on number 3 of 7. So not quite halfway, but we're close there. And I usually get probably more out of leading than anyone gets out of participating. As I've dug into this has been very meaningful to me, and so I've really enjoyed this. So and I appreciate that you all would join in, and I appreciate that the good words that many of you have shared and sharing some appreciation. So thank you for that, and just glad that you're here. So let's join in for our third time here of being together, and I've been using some worship materials here just to kind of give this a worshipful focus as we're together. And what I've been using is from the Book of Common Worship Daily Prayer. And so let's begin here. So, and this is a prayer from Ignatius of Loyola, 1556. So it goes back a little ways. So let us pray. Teach us, good Lord, to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and to not seek for any reward, save that of knowing that we do your will. Amen. Amen. Well, what I've been sharing with you here is the 7 last words from the cross, kind of what traditionally people notice as the 7 last things that Jesus says. I think I said this a week or two before. So we glean these from different gospels, and it's not like we got them blow by blow from one gospel, but we gather these from different gospels. That 7 things that Jesus has said, and we take this as things of significance as Jesus says these from the cross. And so let me come up a little bigger here with you. So for this and here, as I've shared with you already, these are the 7 last things. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. This day you will be with me in paradise. Woman, behold your son. My God, why have you forsaken me? I thirst. It is finished. And into your hands I commit my spirit. So today, here's the longer explanation of it all from John chapter 19. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, here's your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here's your mother." And from that time on, the disciple took her into his home. Okay, and that's Common English Bible, John 19, 26 and 27. Let me come back to you full screen here. There's a lot could be said about this little story here, this little snippet here from the Gospel of John. One, there's this character, and let me hear this as I took it away. I'll bring it back up to you. There's the disciple throughout the Gospel of John. You hear this disciple referred to as the disciple whom Jesus loved, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on who exactly that was or what that's all about. And there's a lot of ways that you could understand that if that was a particular disciple. We call that John, from the Gospel of John, but we really don't know. It's kind of a mysterious kind of thing. What's going on here? This disciple whom Jesus loved, and is this a literary device that the Gospel writer is using? It is a mystery to us, but here we find Jesus that is on the cross, and we're told that his mother and a couple other women are there, and a couple of things to say about that. One, in Jesus' culture, it's not a friendly place in that time for women, and particularly for a woman who is widowed or divorced. That there's not there's not a lot of ways to take care of yourself. It's not like they have Social Security or anything like that, and so they're left to the mercy of their family. And families hopefully did the right thing, but that's not always the case. And so here Jesus, seeing the need of his mother, and seeing this disciple whom he loves, that he charges this disciple to take care of his mom. which is a big deal, to say, okay, from now on, she's your mom. You got to take care of her. So, okay. So one, feel the weight of this situation, but also here, Jesus is looking out for the needs of his mom here. And so this is an act of compassion and an act of care for her. It's interesting in the Gospel of John, Mary doesn't really show up very much at the beginning at the wedding of Cana, the water to wine story, that she's there, urging him to do something. And he calls her woman again, too, now. So what's going on here is as he kind of uses this title for her rather than mother or anything. And I'd have to learn about the culture a little bit to learn about how would somebody like this address his mom in that culture. But so she shows up there, and then we really don't see her until the end. And a couple of things to say about that. One, how Christians understand Mary, Jesus' mother, that there's diversity. If we would visit a Catholic church, our Catholic sisters and brothers, or Orthodox church, you would find Mary very much featured prominently, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that lots of statues and lots of prayers directed towards Mary, and I don't want to get into Catholic versus Protestant understanding of how we view Mary here, but just to say, and I did a little research that Catholics would see Mary as our great spiritual mother and a heavenly advocate who intercedes for us. And so, in the Catholic tradition, that they'll often ask saints to pray for them. And it's sort of the sense of talk to someone who's close to God, that maybe maybe they might help us get something from God. And that sounds a little cynical, and I don't mean it like that, but the sense of, if you know someone close to power, you might ask them to say, hey, can you do something about this? So that's, our Catholic sisters and brothers will often ask for the prayers of the saints, and particularly Mary as one particularly close. But I also think there's a sense of tenderness and love that they see in Mary, and it, think of all of us that, and I realize not everyone has great relationships with their moms, and there's hurtful and broken relationships there, but most of us probably see our mothers as places of tenderness, and think back to the tenderness of our mothers, and see that in Mary, and appeal to that. One thing I'll say, regardless of however, whatever Christian camp we find ourselves in, is, Mary is one who says yes to God. Just like, and I never thought of this connection, but just like Stanley Hauerwas brings out, that just like Abraham back in the Hebrew scriptures, that Abraham says yes to God. Before he's named Abraham, before he's Abram and Sarai, and the call comes to Abram. Abram, go from your father's house and your family, go to the place that I will show you. And so this is the beginning of God beginning a work of redemption, a work of something new. And Abram says yes. Abram picks up and leaves. It says, so Abram went. And so, Abram is one who says yes to God, and in the same way Mary does. That Mary says yes to what God is doing through her. That this child is that God's going to do something significant through the child that she carries. She says yes to God as well. So, however we choose to understand Mary's role in all of this, we can look at Mary as kind of a Hall of Fame hero of faith, that she said yes to God. And so that's all a little discourse, here, a little side point here to say, she's a significant player here in this story. One thing I think about often is, one time I was walking the Stations of the Cross. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, and typically you would see that in like a Catholic church and I think a couple of years ago on Maundy Thursday, we did kind of a live Stations of the Cross, but I think there was like 6 stations that we did in our sanctuary. We had 6 different places where we all went place to place, and we had different things we did, and it was very meaningful, very powerful night. But at a Catholic retreat center or a Catholic church, you might see the Stations of the Cross, and it's a way of kind of, you go from place to place and you kind of walk with Jesus along the way. And I was doing that there. There was a clergy group I was a part of in Northwest Indiana, and one of my friends, a female pastor, it was, for whatever reason, she and I were the only ones there, and she's a mom, So we were walking that and at this retreat center that's there in Northwest Indiana, and an outside kind of thing, very beautiful setting. And we got to the one where one of the stations has to do with Mary, that Jesus meets Mary on his way to the cross. And my friend said this must have been so hard for his mother, and she was viewing that as a mom too. and I thought that's something I need to think about. And so here we find Mary at the cross, and which had to be an awful place for a mom, however you choose to understand Mary. But here we find her at the cross, and Jesus looks out for her needs and says to her, okay, now you're going to go into to his home, and you will be as a mother to him, and he will be as a son to you. And we're told from that point on that he took care of her. Now, there's a lot of ways you could go with this, and just simply saying, okay, viewing it particularly practically, just to say, okay, Jesus is looking out for the needs of his mom. One thing that I'm always curious about whenever I read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, is, and maybe this is a part of me that I was an English minor in college, is I'm always curious about the way the story is told and why certain things are included. And so, and all of us do that. Say when you tell a story, you include certain things and you maybe leave things out. And so we're all editors of our story, aren't we? And so I'm always interested in that, and say, okay, why was this detail left in? Why did John, the gospel writer, feel the need to include this in his story? And so is this just a random detail, or is there significance here to him including this? Now, most scholars think, people whose jobs are to study the scriptures, think that the Gospel of John was the last gospel to be written. Would have come later after Mark and Matthew and Luke, and so it's later in the history of the church when the Gospel of John comes along. Most scholars who study this think that. And so as John is writing this, we're a few decades into the history of the church, several decades, and even more so than Mark and Matthew and Luke when those were written. It probably was a point, and here we have to kind of think about, got to read between the lines a little bit, but it was probably a time where there were different generations of church already present, and we all experience that in any organization. Certain generations, and how do these generations relate? And so there were maybe it was at the time where the earliest generation, when they were losing them, and so just thinking about that, the fact that, okay, the earliest followers of Jesus, they might not be around anymore by the time John writes this, or they might be losing them. Some scholars think that the reason that John, the gospel writer, would include this is to link the generations. There's the generation of Jesus and his ministry, and linking it with as this beloved disciple, and those who go on to say, okay, that there's a link here between the two. Jesus' family of origin, and also here the church. And so here this disciple has taken Mary into his home. There's a connection. Is linking the generations. I don't know if I'm making that clear or not, but I wonder if John includes that. John, the gospel writer, includes that as a way of connecting those two generations. Maybe, I don't know. With a lot of Bible studies, sometimes we kind of have everything is preceded by maybe. We're doing our best to guess and to give educated guesses. But it makes me think about, I'm old enough now that as I reflect upon my life, that there are certain eras of my life that I look back on and reflect upon. and childhood and teenage years and college years and my 20s, my 30s. And I'm on the tail end of my 40s. So there are certain eras, and some of that has to do with what I was doing at the time, or whether I was in school or I was working at this place, or I was living in this state or whatever. But there are certain eras of my life. All of us do that, don't you? You live long enough, and you can kind of divide your life into sections. And I for myself, as I reflect back on it, there's sometimes there's a temptation to wish you could erase certain parts of the past. You're like, oh my gosh, what a knucklehead I was back then, or where you've grown enough where you reflect back upon the past and you think, well, actually, that man, what I just rather forget about that. I don't want to talk about that. And I had a friend who she had. Her college years, she wasn't really proud of what she was doing, and it wasn't that there wasn't anything negative or sinful or anything. She just wasn't proud of kind of who she was then and what she was all about, and she's like, oh, I don't want to talk about, I want to move on from that, and so I understand that we all can change, we all can grow, we all can make a different focus to our life than what was in the past. But I think for myself, as I reflect back on my life, all of that is a part of me. All of that is a part of me, all of those experiences. And so, yes, I've changed and I've grown, and there's things that I look back on and I think, one, it's just like, oh, I'm a knucklehead, but even things I wish I could change that, or I wish I would have done that differently, or I wish all of us do that, don't we, as we reflect back upon our life. But the thing I have to say is, God was with me through all of that. The same God, with me through that whole journey. It's not like, okay, there was that passage and God wasn't present. No, God was there at all. We sing that hymn. There's that traditional hymn, "Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope in years to come." And that's kind of a traditional hymn, but that's so powerful, that sense of, okay, our hope in ages past, but also our hope in years to come, and also I think in the present, that God is with us in the present, the same God through all of that. And here, as I read about connecting, is maybe the gospel writer is trying to remind us that the Jesus of Mary, his earthly mother, and also the Jesus of the church, trying to remind us that there is an undeniable bridge here between the two. You can't separate one from the other, and reminding us that this beloved disciple takes Mary into his home as his own mother. Maybe he's trying to remind us that, okay, you can't leave out any one part. You can't leave out that past. You can't go forward without, you can't erase that. They're connected. So something to think about here. Let me come back to the screen here. Is, where in your past do you need Christ's peace? And how will what Christ, and this is, now I look at this here. Let me, well, it's too late now. I was going to try to change the grammar. What I was trying to say is, how is what Christ has given you in your past guide your future? And I messed up the verbiage there. So I need an editor there before I go forward. So, but how is what Christ has given you in the past? How will that guide your future? And I'm going to come back to here because that bothers me just looking at that I got that wrong. So, so reflect back upon, okay, how has Christ been with you in the past? But how is whatever Christ has given you in the past, how will that guide you into the future? They're both there. Here in this little episode, as Jesus is on the cross, I kind of feel like we're allowed to reflect upon that for a little bit and to think about that. I often say, and this did not originate from me, so I'm it's one of those things that's passed around among preachers, but I often say that we live between memory and hope. We, as Christians, we have memory on one hand. We remember what God has done for us, but we also have hope for the future. But we live in hope for what God is yet to do. We live with both. But even as we're in the present, and we can't neglect the present as well. That memory is a part of us too, and we can't it's not like we erase the memory or it's not there. No, 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 no. Same God through all of that, in past, present, and future. And so here, this little episode here as Jesus is on the cross, as he links his mother with a disciple who will carry on, one of the disciples who will carry on his work in the future. We see the past and the present and the future brought together in this little story. Something to think about. So I appreciate you all being with me here today. I think what I may do here is put in the link. The links here are in the comment section on the Facebook and YouTube. A link to a musical work that's based upon the 7 last words of the cross. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of musical pieces that have been developed out of these. And so they're usually pretty serious stuff, but it's good for Lent. And so if something like that appeals to you for further reflection, I'm going to put a link in the comment section. So check that out. But appreciate you being here with us. For our conclusion, may God bless us and show us compassion and mercy. Amen. Well, grace and peace to you all. Look forward to being with you next week. And I enjoy so much this chance for us to be together and to give some spiritual significance to the season of Lent here. So grace and peace to you all. God bless you. Bye-bye.